Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. It's predictions time, baby. We actually missed our predictions last week because we were crazy. We actually missed our predictions last time round because we were crazy busy. Crazy. Work was hectic. We were busy after work. We were doing filming with the Edinburgh Rugby lads. We were filming with the Real Housewives of Atlanta. It was crazy. Crazy. But we are back and it is time for our predictions for the Brazilian Grand Prix, which I have to say is actually, I think, one of my favourite tracks on the entire calendar. It is up there with like Monza, Silverstone, maybe Austin, Suzuka. I'm going to say Imola because I think Imola is an absolute banger track, even though we've lost it for next year. Spa, like it's an all-time great circuit, and I absolutely love the Brazilian GP every year. It's just a bit of a banger every year, and I have a feeling that this weekend is going to be no different. It's a sprint weekend, and I actually feel like the Brazilian GP is one of those ones where we could have it be a sprint every year, and I wouldn't actually be mad. Not for in the same way that like Miami can be a sprint every year, because I feel it needs a little something extra because it's actually pretty boring. Whereas Brazil, because it's such a banger, it just makes it even more of a banger, having that little session. And the weather's always chaos. And this weekend looks like it could be pretty spicy for the weather. We have rain throughout the sessions on Friday, which means we could have a very interesting quali. There's storms predicted, it looks like, on the Saturday, which means could be a spicy sprint and a spicy qualifying. And then the main race on Sunday looks like it could be dry, but again, anything can happen. Anything can happen with the weather in Brazil, and I am pumped. We're diving into our predictions, and for sprint pole, I've gone Max Verstappen. The Brazilian Grand Prix is categorically the decider for whether or not Max Verstappen is in this championship fight or not. If he dominates and he closes the gap to Lando and Oscar by a considerable amount, it's game on. It's absolutely game on. On the flip side, if he gets anything lower than a podium, a P4, P5, P6, something like that, I would say it's game over. I would say it's game over and this championship is between Lando and Oscar. But looking at this weekend, it could be quite dreamy for Max. He's fantastic at Brazil. It is one of his favourite tracks. He always does very well there. The weather could definitely be in his favour if it's a wet race. You just have to look back to his performance last year to see how much he thrived in those conditions. And it's a sprint weekend, which he usually nails. I think he's got the most wins out of any of the drivers since the sprint was introduced. So it could all just work in his favour. Now for sprint winner, I've got Max Verstappen, obviously. As I said, this categorically feels like the deciding moment of whether or not Max Verstappen is in this championship fight or not. He needs to have a good result. He needs to close the gap further to Oscar and Lando. And this weekend could very well be a good weekend to do that. Everything, as I said, seems to point towards Max having a decent result this weekend. And he'll know that he needs to have a decent performance and the pressure will be on. I don't think we'll see any cracks or anything begin to show, but I do think we will see every dive bomb, every bending of the rules, aggressive driving from Max because he knows he has to get a decent result. I mean, if he's on pole for the sprint, he's probably going to win that anyway, but I do think we'll see a little bit more of an aggressive Max this weekend. But sprint pole and sprint winner, Max Verstappen. Now for pole position for the main race, Lando Norris. Now I predicted Lando on pole without actually knowing the weather forecast, and if it is a wet quali, it kind of throws things up in the air a little bit more. However, it was a championship drive from Lando Norris in Mexico to secure that win. It was absolutely stellar, and it was as near perfect weekend. I say near because I don't think you can get actual perfection. And I do think that this run of form of good performance will carry on into Brazil, and I think he should run fairly well around here. Now for P3 in the race, I've gone Lewis Hamilton. Now this is like my one vibey prediction that I'm just kind of throwing in because it was something I would really enjoy. Like, I'd really enjoy Lewis Hamilton getting a podium. We have to get a solid performance from him by the end of the season. Like, we have to get a podium performance from him by the end of the season. And I mean in the main race, I'm not talking about the sprint, because he's won a sprint and that's fantastic. But I need him to be on a podium in the main race. I need him to get his first podium this year. I just think an LH podium before the season finishes would just really make everything feel a little bit better. He's usually fantastic around Brazil. He runs very well around Interlagos. He looks to be getting a grip on the car slightly, a little bit, you know. It's 21 races too late, but better late than never. I just think everyone would love to see Lewis Hamilton on a podium in his first year on Ferrari. I mean, we would love to have seen a Lewis Hamilton win in his first year in Ferrari, but I just don't think we're going to get that. So I'll settle for a P3 podium. Like, I'll take a podium and, you know, I'll celebrate it like a win. Now, for P2 in the race, I've gone Lando Norris. As I said, I think Lando's good form will continue and we'll see Lando P2. I can see Lando creating a little bit more of a gap in the championship between himself and Oscar Piastri this weekend. It just seems like Oscar's not getting it. He's really struggling and just doesn't seem to be on top of that car, and I can't see him getting the form back through the next, 4 races that we've got. Even though I do think Qatar and Abu Dhabi should really suit McLaren, I do just feel like it's going to be a bit of a struggle for him. And listen, Lando's had his struggles with the car as well. He spent quite a bit of the season saying he just didn't feel on it. And I think after his performance in Mexico, he'll have quite a bit of a confidence boost, which will be key going into this weekend. It's a sprint. The weather's a bit crazy. Everything's, we're into the business end of this season and everything's incredibly close. So I can see Lando getting P2. Now for P1 and the winner of the Brazilian GP, I've got Max Verstappen. I have to say I really enjoy and love how Max is actually the left field option for a win in this season. Like, if I'd predicted this in 2023, I'd be called incredibly boring. But now it's out there. I do think that if Max is to win this championship, he really needs to optimize the likes of Brazil, the likes of Vegas. Because, as I said, I think Qatar and Abu Dhabi will really suit McLaren. I think the issue for Max is at the moment that there are other drivers who will just sort of insert themselves into these podium positions, potentially ahead of Max and in between the McLaren boys, like your George Russells, who I imagine in Vegas will do very, very well. You've got Charles Leclerc sometimes popping in a wee podium performance, and that'll really hurt Max's championship bid. So Max needs to optimize every single opportunity he's given, and he should run incredibly well around here. I don't see this weekend being awful for Max. I feel like everything points towards Max having a good weekend, and he needs to nail this weekend. He needs to nail Vegas, because Qatar and Abu Dhabi are just really going to suit that McLaren. And to be fair, I've said that, and it's not worked out that way. But Max needs a decent performance, and this weekend has all the makings of a Max masterclass, and I need it to happen. I need it to happen. I want Max in this championship fight. I want it to be close. My God, I would love nothing more than them going into Abu Dhabi with nothing splitting them. Like a couple of points, even if they were tied. Oh, that would be sexy, wouldn't it? A 3-way fight for the win and they're all tied. The chances of that happening are very slim, but my God, I would love that. Moving on to my other predictions. My first one is Gabriel Bortoleto has a good weekend, and I will class Bortoleto scoring points as a good weekend in the main race. I don't think he will score points in the sprint. I think that might be a bit of a tall order, with it only going up to P8. But for the main race, I'll take a decent qualifying and some points in the main race. This is like my good feeling prediction. It's his first home race. There's a Brazilian back on the grid. It's going to be mega. Like, the vibes are going to be huge. It's going to be a vibey weekend with all the Brazilian fans cheering on Bortoleto. And I just really want him to have a decent race in front of his home crowd. I just really would love it. And he's been on a little bit of a string of poor form since we left the European part of the season. Yeah, I just think we'll all be a lot happier with Bortoleto scoring some points at his home race. Oh my God, imagine. I know I said Lewis Hamilton was like my vibey prediction, but this is just that feel good. And that is purely what this is based on. Feel good vibes. I would love Bortoleto to score some points in front of his home audience. That's it. That's it. For the home fans, for Bortoleto, for Brazil, I think that would be mega. My next prediction, and it has nothing really to do with the race or the performances on track or anything, but I have a feeling that this weekend we could get the announcement that Franco Colapinto is going to be driving for Alpine next year. And listen, it's the closest he's got to a home race. It's a good weekend to do it, I feel like, and I know he'll probably have a terrible weekend on track because the Alpine is a bit of a disaster, but, you know, he could walk away from this weekend with a shiny new contract, even though he's probably already got a contract because he signed on for 5 years, but like a contract for him to race full-time next year. I feel like it makes sense to do it this weekend, and I'm beginning to just be like, can we get this done? Like, can we just wrap up the seats for next season? Because Red Bull is going to go into probably after the season finishes. It'll be like what happened with Checo. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's just going to drag on and on. So I think it'd be a good time to get Colapinto's contract done. I have imagined there'll be a lot of his sponsors and everything there. It just seems like a good weekend. I know he's not Brazilian, and it's going to be a bit different because we've got an actual Brazilian on the grid, but there'll be a load of Argentinian fans that have probably made the trip to go and watch Franco, I imagine. I just think it's a good weekend for Colapinto to get his contract. And finally, God, I've gone all rookies for these predictions, actually. I didn't realise that when I was making them, that these three would be all rookies. My final prediction is that Oliver Bearman flops, that it is a bit of a shocker weekend for Oliver Bearman, and I could see it happening. Listen, it's got nothing to do with the performance of the Haas. It's got nothing to do with anything other than the fact that last year Bearman spent the majority of the race facing the wrong direction. I think Brazil 2024 was maybe the worst race in Oliver Bearman's career. And listen, the conditions were crazy. They were crazy. That rain was mental. And if there's any possibility that we have a wet race, I reckon we could see a bit of a crazy... Do you know, remember last year when qualifying took ages because it was like 5 red flags? That popped up on my feed this morning, actually, and I'd forgotten all about that. God, I really just blocked a lot of things out. Anyway, if it is a dry race, I obviously don't imagine it being as bad as last year. I imagine he'll maybe manage to stick it on the road, but I do imagine he'll struggle. If there is rain, it doesn't even need to be as much rain as last year, I reckon that he will struggle even more. I just don't think it's going to be a good weekend for him. I think it is just a flop for Bearman this weekend. And I hope I'm wrong, because coming off the back of a P4 in Mexico, but it kind of feels like, well, you know, you were right up here with your P4. Oh, it all falls apart. Do you know what I mean? I don't want it to, but I just feel like it's going to be a flop. And that is everything from us. We'll be back over the weekend with all of the latest from the Brazilian Grand Prix weekend. Let us know your predictions in the comments down below. Enjoy the rest of your day. Love you. Bye.